June 18, 1944. 6:30 hours. Somewhere beyond the hedgerows of Normandy. The rain hasn't fully stopped. It never really does. It just thins enough to become a cold mist that clings to skin and steel. An M4 Sherman sits crooked in the mud, its left track blown clean off, transmission housing split open like a cracked jaw. Smoke still curls from the engine deck. The tank is silent now. Too silent. A few hours earlier, it had been alive. You can still smell it: burnt oil, hot metal, cordite, the lingering breath of a machine that fought until it physically couldn't move anymore. Nearby, artillery thumps in the distance, not close, yet, but close enough that no one mistakes this place for the rear. A group of men crouch beside the tank. They're not infantry. They carry no rifles at the ready, no grenades clipped to their webbing. Their hands are black with grease. These are ordnance men, maintenance, recovery, the ones nobody films when the war is going well and nobody remembers when it is. At the center of them stands Staff Sergeant Frank Delaney, 31 years old, Army Ordnance Corps. His helmet sits low on his brow, rain collecting in its rim. He runs one hand along the torn steel of the transmission housing, feeling it more than looking at it. He already knows what the report says. Tank mobility kill, total loss, await recovery. That's what it says every time. Delaney exhales slowly. Because yesterday, that same report listed 9 Shermans from this sector alone. 9 tanks written off. 9 crews forced to abandon them under fire. And the infantry pushing east doesn't have 9 extra tanks waiting behind the beach. Not anymore. The men of the 2nd Armored Division learned that truth fast after Normandy. The beaches were taken, but inland was a maze of hedgerows so thick a tank could barely nose through them. German 75mm guns waited behind every green wall. Panzerfaust teams hid in ditches. A single shot to the track, the transmission, the drive sprocket. And the Sherman was done. Not destroyed. Just stranded. The German gunners knew that too. They stopped trying to kill the tank. They just stopped it. Delaney straightens up as another Sherman limps past on the road behind him, track clanking unevenly. The crew inside doesn't look left or right. They stare straight ahead, because every stopped tank feels like a coffin waiting to be sealed. Someone shouts from the tree line. "Sergeant, battalion wants a count by noon." Delaney nods without answering. He already knows what the count will be. Too many broken tanks. Not enough replacements. And a front line that doesn't wait. Back at the maintenance collection point, a bombed-out orchard marked with yellow panels, the situation is worse. Shermans sit nose to tail like wounded animals dragged from the road. Some burned. Some intact except for one ruined part that might as well be the heart. Transmissions shattered by shock. Final drives cracked. Tracks twisted into useless steel ribbons. By the book, each of these tanks should be hauled back miles to a depot, inspected, shipped, rebuilt. By the book, it would take weeks. The book was written before Normandy. Delaney watches a recovery crew argue beside a tank marked salvage only in white chalk. The label is final. Once it's there, the tank is considered dead, parts stripped later if anyone has time. He doesn't like that word. Dead. Because when he looks at these machines, he doesn't see wreckage. He sees pieces. And pieces can be moved. That night just after sunset, German artillery walks closer. Shells crash beyond the orchard, shaking apples loose from the trees. Men flinch. Tools rattle. Delaney kneels beside a wrecked Sherman brought in from the morning fight. Its hull is burned through. Crew didn't make it. No one says their names. He climbs inside anyway. The interior smells like smoke and loss, but his eyes aren't on that. They're on the transmission assembly. It's intact. Heavy, complex, supposed to take a crane and a depot crew to remove. Delaney stares at it longer than he should. Then he does something odd. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a stub of pencil and a folded scrap of ration paper. He starts sketching. Not the tank. The order of bolts. The angle. The way the housing sits when tension is released. One of his men, Corporal Eddie Marks, watches him. "Sergeant, what are you doing?" Delaney doesn't look up. "I'm thinking." Marks snorts. "That thing weighs 2 tons. Delaney nods. "Yeah. You can't swap that in the field." Delaney finally looks at him. "Who says we have to lift it?" The artillery creeps closer. A shell lands somewhere behind the orchard, too close this time. Dirt rains down. Someone yells to kill the lantern. Darkness swallows the area. But Delaney keeps drawing. Because somewhere between the wrecked tank, the missing replacements, and the infantry waiting up front, something is clicking into place. If the Germans are winning by stopping Shermans, then maybe the answer isn't building new tanks. Maybe the answer is refusing to let them stay stopped. By midnight, Delaney is walking between the rows of wrecks with a flashlight covered in cloth, counting something no officer has asked him to count. Not tanks. Parts. Transmissions still usable. Track assemblies with only one side damaged. Final drives cracked on one tank, intact on another. A forbidden thought begins to form. What if one dead tank could bring 2 back to life? What if the front didn't need replacements, just resurrection? At 200 hours, Delaney gathers his men. Rain still falling, guns still muttering in the dark. He spreads the paper on an ammo crate. "This isn't regulation," he says quietly. No one laughs. "This isn't approved, and if it fails, someone up there is going to scream." Mark studies the sketch. "How long would it take?" Delaney hesitates, then answers honestly. "If we're right, 6 hours. A pause. "And if we're wrong?" someone asks. Delaney looks toward the road leading back to the front, where the sound of tank engines is already thinning. "Then tomorrow morning," he says, "they'll have fewer tanks than today." No one argues, because they already know that part is true. They roll a wrecked Sherman forward, then another beside it. And under the cover of darkness, with artillery inching closer and no manual to guide them, the mechanics begin unbolting a tank in a way no one has ever officially approved. If it works, the battlefield will never look the same again. If it does, they'll be caught with half a tank and no explanation. As Delaney drives the first bolt free, the metal shrieks loudly in the night. Every man freezes. Somewhere a flare pops in the distance. And for the first time, the war feels like it's watching them back. The flare fades. For a moment, no one breathes. Then darkness settles back over the orchard, heavy, damp, uncertain. Delaney releases the wrench slowly. The bolt comes free without snapping, a small victory, the kind no report will ever record. "All right," he whispers, "keep going." The men move with the careful urgency of people who know the rules, and are breaking them anyway. They work by touch as much as sight. Canvas tarps stretched to block stray light, tools wrapped in rags so they won't clink. Every sound feels too loud, every pause too long. The transmission housing is the heart of the Sherman, massive, complicated, designed to be removed only in depots with overhead cranes and days of time. They have neither. Delaney studies the angle again. He wedges a timber beneath the housing, then another. Instead of lifting the weight, they're rolling it inch by inch, transferring the load from bolt to block to ground. It's crude. It's brilliant. The idea isn't to fight gravity. It's to trick it. "Easy, easy," Delaney murmurs as the housing tilts. The men strain, boots sink into mud, A pry bar groans. For a heartbeat, it feels like the entire assembly might tear loose and crush someone flat. Then it settles. A dull, heavy thud. No explosion. No collapse. No scream. Marks exhales shakily. Holy hell. Delaney doesn't smile. They're only halfway there. 2 hours later, sweat soaks through wool uniforms despite the cold. Fingers are numb. Hands bleed. But the ruined transmission is free. They drag it aside. From the burned-out tank, Delaney signals toward the second Sherman, one that took a direct hit to the front housing but whose internals remain untouched. "This one's our donor," he says. Someone hesitates. "That tank's still on the books." Delaney nods. "Not after sunrise." They repeat the process, slower now, more confident. The men understand the sequence. Which bolts fight back, which ones come loose easy. It becomes a rhythm. Unbolt. Brace. Lower. Slide. Around 400 hours, artillery thunders closer again. German fire searching blindly behind the lines. A shell lands near the orchard fence. Shrapnel snaps branches. One mechanic flinches hard enough to drop a wrench. No one yells. They just keep working. Because stopping now means nothing matters. When the intact transmission is finally positioned beneath the damaged Sherman, Delaney crawls halfway under the hull, rain soaking his back. "Bring it up 2 inches, he calls. The men lever the timber. Hold. Metal meets metal. The bolt holes almost align. Almost. Delaney curses softly, adjusts the angle by fractions. Dirt smears his face. He taps once with a hammer. Now. The bolt slides through. A moment passes. Then someone laughs, a sharp, startled sound that dies quickly as everyone remembers where they are. They bolt the assembly down as dawn begins to lighten the sky. Gray, cold, unforgiving. By the time birds begin calling, the Sherman sits whole again, mismatched parts, scarred armor but standing. The engine hasn't been tested. No one says it out loud, but everyone feels the same fear. If it doesn't start, all of this means nothing. Delaney climbs into the tank. He settles into the driver's seat, hands on unfamiliar levers. "Clear," someone calls. He flips the switch. Nothing. A pause. Then the engine coughs. Once, twice. Then roars. The sound is violent, alive, beautiful. Men stumble backward, laughing. Someone slaps the armor. Another swears under his breath like he's just seen a ghost. The tank moves. Slow at first, then steadier. Tracks bite into the mud. A Sherman declared dead 12 hours earlier is rolling under its own power. Marks just stares. "Jesus, we actually did it." Delaney shuts the engine down. "Once doesn't mean anything," he says. "We need to know if it holds." They don't have long to wait. At 7:30 hours, a lieutenant from battalion arrives in a jeep, already irritated. "What the hell is that tank doing operational?" he snaps. Delaney stands at attention. "Field repair, sir." The officer looks from the tank to the pile of stripped parts nearby. "That's not authorized." "No, sir. You can't just rebuild Shermans overnight." Delaney meets his eyes. "With respect, sir, we already did." The lieutenant hesitates. He's tired. Everyone is tired. "How long?" he asks. 6 hours, Delaney answers. The officer laughs once, short, disbelieving. "That's impossible." A runner appears breathless from the road. "Sir, infantry's requesting armor support immediately." The lieutenant looks back at the tank. Then at Delaney. "Can it fight?" Delaney doesn't answer right away. Because this is the moment everything hinges on. "Yes, sir," he says finally, "if you let it." The lieutenant nods once. Send it. The Sherman rumbles back toward the front before breakfast. By noon, word spreads. By nightfall, commanders start asking questions. Because reports are coming in, strange ones. Tanks destroyed in the morning, reappearing by evening. German observers confused. Infantry swearing they recognize serial numbers that shouldn't exist anymore. And in a muddy orchard behind the lines, Delaney and his men are already stripping another wreck. Because now they know something the rulebook never taught. The Germans can stop a tank, but they can't stop an idea. And the next morning, the demand doesn't come from a lieutenant. It comes from division headquarters. The message arrives just after dawn. Not shouted, not dramatic. Typed neatly on damp paper and delivered by a nervous courier who looks far too clean for this part of France. Ordnance Detachment report immediately to division. Delaney reads it twice. Around him, the orchard is already alive again, engines coughing awake, men hauling parts, the smell of fuel mixing with wet leaves. 3 Shermans now sit in a rough line, each wearing scars from different battles, each rebuilt from the remains of others. None of them should exist. Delaney folds the paper and hands command to Corporal Marks. "Don't stop," he says, "even if I'm not back." Marks nods. He understands what that means. Division headquarters occupies a shattered stone farmhouse 2 miles back. Maps cover the walls. Radios chatter nonstop. Officers speak in clipped, urgent fragments, as if full sentences cost time they don't have. Delaney stands out immediately. He's muddy, exhausted, smells like oil and smoke. A major studies him over a pair of wire-rimmed glasses. "You're the one rebuilding tanks." "Yes, sir." "In the field." "Yes, sir." The major flips through a folder. "We've got reports of Shermans returning to combat less than 12 hours after being written off. German intelligence believes we're receiving emergency reinforcements from England." Delaney says nothing. The major leans back slowly. "You're telling me that's you?" "Yes, sir." A pause. Then the major asks the question that actually matters. "How many can you turn around?" Delaney hesitates. Not because he doesn't know, but because saying it out loud sounds insane. "If we have donor wrecks," he says carefully, "we can rebuild 2 tanks from 3, sometimes 3 from 4. Silence. The room seems to still. A colonel near the map table finally mutters, "That changes everything." Because it does. For the first time since Normandy, armor losses stop being final. A tank hit at 900 might be back by dusk. A crew forced to bail out one day might climb back in the next. And more importantly, the Germans don't know this. Their battlefield math is wrong. Panzer commanders record kills. They adjust tactics. They believe they're winning attrition. But the numbers don't stay dead. Within 48 hours, Delaney's team is no longer working alone. Ordnance units from neighboring battalions arrive to observe. Officers hover. Notes are taken. A captain demands to know why this method isn't in the manual. Delaney answers honestly. Because nobody thought it would work. Soon, orchards become workshops. Bombed barns turn into impromptu depots. Wrecked Shermans are dragged back not for burial, but for harvest. Crews begin marking their abandoned tanks differently now. Not with salvage only, but with chalk arrows and notes. Trans good. Final drive intact. Don't burn. Infantry starts guarding disabled tanks overnight, not to protect wreckage, but to protect tomorrow's armor. Even tank crews change. Men who once walked away from a disabled Sherman, believing their war was over, now wait nearby, watching mechanics work through the night. Sometimes they help. Sometimes they just sit silently, helmets in their hands, waiting to see if their tank comes back to life. One night, Delaney notices a young driver standing alone beside a rebuilt Sherman. "Something wrong?" Delaney asks. The driver shakes his head. "I just thought she was gone," he says quietly. "Didn't think I'd ever see her again." The tank idles behind him, engine humming steady. War teaches men not to hope. And yet here it is. By early July, German after-action reports begin to show confusion. Enemy armor strength is inconsistent. Destroyed vehicles reappear. American units display unexpected endurance. They don't know about Delaney. They don't know about the orchard. They only know that the enemy doesn't seem to bleed the way he should. Then comes the test that no amount of grease or ingenuity can prepare them for. A major German counterattack forms near St. Lo. Panzer Lehr Division, veteran crews, heavy guns. American armor losses spike overnight. Wrecks pile up faster than Delaney's men can reach them. For the first time since this began, the system is in danger of collapsing under its own success. Delaney walks the line of damaged tanks at sunset. Too many. Far too many. Marx approaches quietly. "We can't fix all of these." Delaney knows. The method that saved them might now drown them. And that night, as artillery flashes light the horizon, Delaney realizes something terrifying. If they fail tomorrow, the army will feel it immediately. Because the front has already begun depending on ghosts. And ghosts, once expected, cannot be allowed to disappear again. At 2300 hours, Delaney makes a decision that could either save the sector or finally break his men. He gathers the crews. "We're not sleeping tonight," he says. No one complains. Because somewhere ahead, infantry is digging in, counting on tanks that technically don't exist yet. And just before midnight, Delaney orders something no ordnance manual has ever permitted. They will rebuild 4 tanks at once. Under fire. With parts still warm. If it works, the line holds. If it does, the morning will come with empty roads, 2300 hours. A cold wind cuts through the orchard, carrying the distant echo of artillery. Mud clings to boots and uniforms, freezing sweat and blood alike. Delaney stands at the center of 4 wrecked Shermans, their twisted hulls illuminated by the flickering light of kerosene lamps. Each tank is a story of destruction, one with its turret blown off, another missing a track, a third with its engine block fractured, the fourth scorched from a direct hit to the side. By the book, none of them should ever move again. But tonight, Delaney doesn't follow the book. "Everyone knows their positions," he says. His voice is low, deliberate. "Marx, you take the lead tank. I'll oversee the second. The other 2 move as fast as you can. Timing is everything." The men nod silently. No bravado, no jokes, only the cold understanding that if one tank fails, it could tear the plan apart for all 4. They begin. It's organized chaos. Wrenches clank against steel. Hydraulic jacks groan. Pry bars scream as they bend metal, every motion precise yet improvised. Delaney crouches beneath the first Sherman, adjusting the transmission. He can feel the alignment with his knees as much as with his hands. Marx shouts numbers over the din, bolt sizes, torque measurements, each shout carrying through the orchard like a pulse. Halfway through the operation, a flare lights up the sky. Shells land within 100 yards. Mud and debris rain over the men. No one flinches. Delaney wipes sweat and oil from his eyes and signals forward. The bolts lock into place. Timber braces shift, and the first Sherman's hull begins to bear the weight of the transmission. The engine, silent for days, roars to life with a violent cough and then steadies, trembling but alive. The men freeze for a heartbeat. Then, a collective cheer, muffled, because the night is too dangerous to be loud, breaks out. 1 down, 3 to go. By 200 hours, the second Sherman is operational, By 4:30, the third, the fourth, the most damaged of all, threatens to undo the work of the night. Its final drive is misaligned. One wrong turn could strip teeth from the gears. Delaney crawls beneath the belly, mud and oil slick against his uniform. He presses the gear housing into place with brute force and careful calculation. Marks braces it with a timber as another man slowly threads the bolts. "Hold steady," Delaney whispers almost to himself. A shell explodes nearby, throwing a cloud of dirt across the orchard. The tank shudders. Delaney swears under his breath. He checks the alignment. Perfect. The bolt slides home. The housing locks. Delaney climbs out and wipes his hands. He turns the key. Silence. Then a violent roar. The tank trembles. Smoke curls from the exhaust, but it runs, alive, ready. 4 tanks from the dead. By sunrise, the first infantry unit arrives. Their eyes widen. 2 of these men had abandoned their tanks the previous day, expecting never to see them again. And yet here they are, engines purring, ready for combat. One young private mutters under his breath, How is this possible?" Delaney simply shrugs. Never doubt mechanics. Or men who refuse to quit. The news spreads. Officers begin calling for Delaney's detachment. Tanks once written off are requested on the front line. Reports from German positions describe Shermans reappearing with uncanny regularity, seemingly impervious to destruction. But the miracle isn't just machines returning. It's morale. Infantry who had marched past abandoned hulls now see their own firepower restored. Crews feel hope. And in war, hope, even the smallest spark, is a weapon as sharp as any shell. Yet for all the success, Delaney knows this can't last forever. Supplies are limited. Time is short. The next shell could hit the orchard and undo everything. Still, he allows himself one fleeting thought as he watches the 4 tanks roll out toward the front. They can't stop us now. Not if we refuse to stay dead. And somewhere across the line, German observers jot confused notes. Their calculations are wrong. Their attrition model fails. One officer scrawls hastily, "Shermans impossible reappear." Delaney smiles faintly. He doesn't need them to understand. All that matters is that the front line can count on tanks that, hours ago, were considered gone forever. By mid-morning, the orchard is eerily quiet. Mechanics clean tools, stretch aching muscles, and begin to prep for the next round of repairs. Because Delaney knows the battle is far from over. And tomorrow, more Shermans will fall. But tonight, 4 ghosts have walked. By mid-July, the story of Delaney's orchard had spread through the 2nd Armored Division like wildfire. Officers whispered it during briefings. Crews laughed nervously at first, then grew quiet as they realized the truth. Across Normandy, reports emerged. Shermans killed one day were striking back the next. Entire units began to rely on the impossible. Delaney never sought credit. He didn't write manuals. He didn't decorate his tanks with medals. The men he commanded knew him as stubborn, precise, and maddeningly calm under fire. But those same men carried the memory of seeing their tanks breathe life again when hope seemed thin. Corporal Marks recalls one night, weeks later, as the division pushed toward St. Lo. The orchard lay behind them, muddy ruts still marking every repaired tank. Marks leaned against the hood of a jeep, watching the sun burn through morning fog, and whispered, "I don't think anyone really knew what we did there, not fully." Delaney didn't answer, only tightened his grip on a wrench. He understood. The orchard wasn't just a place, it was a philosophy. War demanded rules, regulations, and reports, but it also demanded imagination, courage, and a refusal to accept the finality of loss. The Germans never figured it out. Intelligence noted the reappearance of Shermans and assumed some mysterious logistical miracle. No one guessed that a handful of men, working through mud, rain, and artillery fire, had rewritten the rules overnight. Back on the front, infantry advanced with renewed confidence. Tanks that would have been abandoned became shields and weapons once more. Casualties were reduced, breakthroughs achieved, and morale, fragile as it had been, was restored. For Delaney and his men, the work never truly stopped. Each morning brought more wrecks, each night another ballet of bolts, timber braces, and sheer stubborn will. By the time Operation Cobra began, the 2nd Armored Division was rolling forward with an arsenal that seemed larger than it actually was. Tanks that the enemy thought destroyed were alive, ready, and relentless. And in the quiet moments, when the artillery lull allowed them a breath, Delaney would glance at a rebuilt Sherman and think not of the destruction it had endured, but of the men it carried, the ground it would reclaim, and the impossible feat that had kept it alive. Because in war, survival isn't just about firepower or strategy. Sometimes it's about refusing to accept what the world declares lost and making the impossible come alive, one tank at a time. In the weeks after Normandy, the impossible had become real. 4 tanks, 6 tanks, dozens. Entire crews returned to their vehicles, eyes wide, hearts steady. And in the muddy orchards behind the front, Staff Sergeant Frank Delaney and his men quietly changed the war. One Sherman, one bolt, one act of defiance at a time. The Germans never understood, but the men on the front line did, and for them that was enough.